Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, May 9th. And in our devotion for today, I want to continue with looking at the true self versus the false self. And again, we are looking at the book, The Deeper Journey by M. Robert Mulholland. This is where a lot of these ideas are coming from. I highly recommend this book. It's a deep book with a lot of very profound, make you think kind of writings and thoughts. But it's a book that at its heart helps us to understand how do we become free to claim this freedom from Christ from the false self and live in our true identity. Now, we've talked a lot about the false self and how it has wrapped itself around us and it is embedded and entangled all of who we are and oftentimes controls us. But as we have met Christ, as we live in union relationship with Christ, we get to discover our true selves. So what is our true self like? Well, if we want to understand the core of who our true selves are, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the story, to Genesis chapter 1. And it's there that God proclaimed, "Let us create people in our image. Let us create them both male and female." And that's what God did. God created all of us in God's image. And so at the very core of who our true selves are is the image of God, a reflection of God. That is why at the very center of who our true self is, we have such value. We are so profound. We are, there's so much good there because it's a reflection of not our false selves, but of God's image, of who God is. God, the story of the Bible builds on this when we learn and discover that while we were still sinners, while we were still wrapped up in our false identity, the result of sin and the fall of all people, the result of the brokenness of this world, while we were dirty and estranged from God, God still loved us. God never stopped loving us. It wasn't as if God started loving us again once Jesus saved us. God continued to love us from the moment of our creation to the moment we are reunited with God. God's love never changed for us. So, at our core of who we are is that we are a reflection of God. We are created in God's image and we are loved. And we are loved and we are part of a family. You know, I've heard many stories about people and the difficulties that they're having with their families, even in this time. Some of us are being drawn closer to families, and as we're drawn closer and we're spending more time with our families, we are reminded of some of the unhealthy dynamics in our families. That, combined with all the stress we're feeling, brings a lot of unhealthy stuff to the forefront. But as we look at our true selves and our true identities, we are reminded that we are part of of a larger family, a larger family, the family of God. And although we don't always feel loved by our human family and we don't always feel loved by our church family, that doesn't mean that we are not loved and accepted by God. I think at the core of it, as we discover more and more of our true selves, we discover that we have a place, that we are loved, and that we are a reflection of the majesty and the wonderfulness of who God is. We discover more and more of ourselves as we develop a deeper, intimate relationship with Christ, because that's what Christ has freed us from, the power of sin to destroy and manipulate and distort who we are, and has invited us into a new life, a life in relationship and independence with Christ, with God, with other people, so that we can have that image of God explode forth, be reflected, and take over who we are. One of the scary things about the true self is that as I have lived my life and as I've delved deeper and understood more and more of my true self, is that I've understood that my true self is not my independent self. The self, the part of me that wants to be independent, wants to be in charge, wants to make all the right decisions, that wants control, that independent self is part of my false self. The true self, my true identity, is in a dependent relationship with God. And that's scary. Everything in my life has taught me to be independent. My culture, my education, my upbringing. It tells me that the accomplished person, the person of value, is the one who is independent, can take care of themselves. And the reality is, in my true self, I'm going to always be in a dependent relationship with God. That's okay. It's scary. But in doing and delving deeper, I discover this true self, and I discover how much of a part of a wonderful family I am. And I get to be who I was really meant to be. And I get to embrace and to live in God's love. And it's worth giving up my independence and my false self and my stubbornness and my always wanting to be in control. Because when I'm in control and I'm living by my agenda, my decisions, I'm inevitably messing things up. So let's go deeper. Let's embrace this new life, this relationship with God that at its core has this truth that I'm a reflection of God. I've created in God's image, and that I'm loved by God. Long before I was ever redeemed or saved or chose to follow Jesus, I was loved deeply and truly by my Creator. Amen. It is Saturday tomorrow. That means it's Sunday. It's a special Mother's Day. Please join with us live worship at 9 a.m. Go ahead beforehand. This is a worship. Not only are we celebrating Mother's Day, but it's also a service of Holy Communion. So beforehand, go ahead and grab some crackers and some bread, some water, some juice or wine, anything you have on hand. And we will use those in our service as we celebrate Holy Communion together. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and look in on those who are most vulnerable.